when that big media outlet came at us and said, paralegals be gone, I said, I don't think so. I thought to myself, no. We're going to really center the human elements that are necessary to the practice of law. That client-facing interaction, right? Those non-negotiable skills of communication to really underscore the importance of that in the use of these assistive tools such as Gen AI in our workflow.
I'm Hal Marcus.
And I'm Memme Onwudiwe.
And this is Meeting of the Minds, the legal AI podcast from Evisort.
We interview lawyers, professors, and legal operations pioneers that are pushing the envelope.
Leaders using technology to drive great business outcomes and shape the future of the profession. Memme, what a fun conversation we just had with Kristine Suero. She is the senior paralegal and the director of business development at Schechter Benefits Law Group in San Diego. She's an instructor at the Paralegal program at the University of San Diego School of Law. She is herself a podcaster. She's the co-host of Legal Luminaries, the Paralegal Edition podcast for the American Association for Paralegal Education. And love this one, 2020 California Paralegal of the Year.
Yeah, no, it was an incredible conversation. I actually met Kristine years ago at the NALA, which is the National Paralegal Association's annual conference, where I was lucky enough to give a presentation both on Paralegal 2.0, which is, AI-enabled paralegals, which we get into a little bit today, and also gave a different session on space law. And I was struck by just how energizing she is and just the zeal that she has for the paralegal profession.
Yeah, we talked about everything tech and AI adoption and how it impacts the role of the paralegal for in-house and for law firms. And we even got into the MCU. I mean, come on.
Yeah, if you're a fan of She-Hulk, you're going to enjoy today's episode. But without further ado, let's get this party started.
Kristine Suero, thanks so much for joining us here on Meeting of the Minds.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Kristine, we met a few years back at a National Paralegal Association conference, a NALA conference, and your energy and excitement and passion for the paralegal study really struck me. Could you give us a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was one of those folks who kind of fell into this career. I was never intended to be a paralegal or someone in the legal profession. Although I recall when I was 16 years old, I actually told my mother, Xena, like the warrior princess, that's her name. I told her that I wanted to be a civil rights attorney. And my mom, being the type of woman that she is, she was a tiger mom. She was like, well, so, I really want you to be in a stable career. And I think it was because she wanted to be a nurse or a doctor. She's like, you're going into the medical profession because I'm paying your bachelor's degree. So I kind of was in that lane. I was studying for my master's in physical therapy when I had a sudden shift because my mother started a business late in life and I had to move back home to help with that. And it was like the universe dropped this course catalog into my mailbox and I'm flipping through it. And I think the 16-year-old Kristine was, kind of bubbling up. And I saw this paralegal program, certificate training program at a local university. And I thought, oh, gosh, that sounds kind of interesting. If there's no studying for my master's in physical therapy, there was nothing in San Diego where I'm located. And so I decided to pursue this paralegal training and it was a game changer. Let me tell you, not only did it improve me as a co-operator of our business, right? I was administrator for our family's business for 17 years. And in that regard, but also it opened up this world to me that let me know that I could participate, right, in the legal profession without actually going to law school. And so I dove right in and it's been a 20-year journey and it has been incredible. The opportunities that I've had in this profession that keep presenting because I do, like you said, Memme, have this passion, drive, zeal for justice and the law. This has really been a terrific way for me to grow and evolve.
This is part of why we were so eager to talk to you today, for all the perspectives that we brought to this program, talking about the impact of AI on the profession, future of the profession, what daily life is like. We haven't really had a paralegal's perspective yet. And, you're uniquely qualified to share that. What do you see as some of the most important skills, just in general, for a paralegal to be successful?
That's such a great question. And I love this. And really, my lens is from this modern legal team approach, right? Because the attorneys, sure, they are the ones who are, the licensed legal professionals. They're leading the team, the charge, if you will. But the folks that are part of this modern day legal team, we have to make sure that we're in alignment, right, with the rules of professional conduct. We are in alignment with the workflows that the attorneys are working for. And that can run the gamut, right? Depending on which environment that I'm in the legal ecosystem, be it in-house, being in a law firm environment, or in a nonprofit, right? But there are universal core skills and competencies that we as legal professionals must have. These are non-negotiables. And I actually am an educator at a local university here in town. And I actually present this to my students in my introduction to law class. And I say, these are non-negotiable skills that you must have once you step foot into whatever legal ecosystem you land in. And these are going to rely heavily on durable skills, formerly known as soft skills, but also, some of the substantive law that they're exposed to in my class, in my course as Introduction to Law. So the durable skills, I'll start there first. I tell them, one, communication is king. You have to be able to communicate not only with your legal team members, but also with your clients. Oftentimes, we are put in positions where we are client facing. So we have to be able to communicate information, on behalf of the attorney, but in a professional context, within our rules of professional conduct, so we don't violate any kind of unauthorized practice of law, right? But also that we are communicating the necessary information to facilitate the case. I like to present to my students that we kind of operate in this project management space, right? If you think about it, that's what a really seasoned professional paralegal does. We are like project managers within our legal teams. So communication, that's a big one, but also time management, right? We have to make sure that we are staying on top of deadlines, timelines, reverse engineering these things based on rules that we are presented with. I'm most familiar in my training and experience is mostly in litigation. Although I now enjoy a role that is hybridized in that I handle as a senior paralegal complex legal matters for our firm, but I also am a business development director for the firm. So I'm also handling legal operations for the firm. So in this role and capacity, what else is very, very important to me is business intelligence. I have to understand what it means for this to be a profitable business and what it means for me in the role as a business development director to engage in community relations and as a brand ambassador almost for the law firm on behalf of the lawyers and the law firm. So those are some of the durable skills that I say are really non-negotiable, right? But going to the substantive side, right? You really do have to be a master of the procedures. For example, in my area of law, litigation, boy, do I have to know the rules, right? The rules of court. And it's like the trifecta, too, because it's not just, you need to know the federal rules of civil procedure. Well, you got to know the local court rules and you got to know the judge's rules, too. And they all apply, So it's kind of being that kind of broad thinker so that I can synthesize all that information, complex information, distill that into very digestible, bite-sized, bites of information so that I can apply that to our, workflows. So when I'm training folks, because I also do that as a senior paralegal, is we will train our new legal team members, including like our brand new attorneys, right, who have not had a lot of experience in legal ecosystems. So having that ability, so that communication piece comes back, right, when we are dealing with these workflows within our respective area of law, whatever it is, contracts, litigation, family law. So really important, one, to be a master of procedures in that regard, but also to embody these durable skills that are necessary to deal with clients and team members.
Hmm. No, thank you for laying out those foundational skills. Yeah, I'm curious if you see a significant difference between the skills necessary for paralegals operating in the law firm and in the in-house contexts.
I think it's really going to be specific to the environment. So meaning, I'm situated in a small law firm. So my workflows, I wear multiple hats, many hats, right? I'm a department of one for my litigation department, right? But when you're maybe in an in-house legal environment, you are now the cost center of that. The business units are your clients now. So you are kind of approaching it in a different way. Though those universal core competencies for, legal professionals still exist, obviously, good time management, good organization skills, things of that nature. I think the difference is really contingent and dependent on your workplace. So even in a large law firm, those roles are more, I would say, systematized or routinized or very much more tailored than when you're in a small law firm where you're kind of expected to do everything. Where again, like for someone like myself who enjoys kind of a split role, I have to kind of have mastery in all of those areas versus if I'm in a larger law firm and I'm maybe in a litigation support role, right? Or I'm technology facing where I'm like the e-discovery specialist. I just saw something like for a huge company out here in San Francisco. They were advertising, if anyone follows me on LinkedIn, I constantly post job announcements, and this one was huge. And I looked at that, and I looked at the salary range, and the cap was in the high 200s for a paralegal, essentially. And so I present this information to my students, and I say, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to dissect this job, posting, and we're going to say, what does this mean to this environment? This is an in-house environment. Look at the KSAs here, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are listed here. What does this tell you about what you need to know in order to be successful in this role, in this environment? So to be able to look at that with a broad lens and say, how can I practically apply the knowledge acquisition, not just substantive law, right? But the practical skill acquisition that I've, developed even in maybe adjacent roles that are not necessarily in the legal space, but there are transferable skills that lend well and nicely to these types of roles, especially like in an in-house environment, right, Meme? It is a different environment than a law firm. So understanding how these business units operate together and understanding that the company and those business units are your clients when you are engaging in projects for them.
Yeah. It also struck me that when you were describing your role within the law firm, you described it as both being a paralegal and doing legal operations. And it strikes me because we've had many legal operations leaders, speak here as part of this podcast, and many of them trace their path through, being a paralegal. But in this world where everything's kind of, melding and all these new roles are growing, what do you see as that difference between the paralegal role and the legal operations role? And, especially given the rise of legal operations that's happened in the last few years?
That's so great. I love this conversation, Meme, because I think about your presentation you did for Nella, where you kind of framed it around that paralegal 2.0 phraseology, and it makes me think in that way, right? Because it's kind of like paralegal 2.0 because it's paralegal plus. So it's having that knowledge about the law, how lawyers work and operate, how these legal workflows exist, right? But also, what does that mean in this type of legal business environment, right? So we are looking at legal operations from the lens of maybe a corporate in-house role. But, and I love this question because you were saying now you see people like me who are embedded within a law firm, right? And I can flex on the legal ops side because I have that knowledge and training from what? My business background. Because you'll recall earlier in the conversation, I said I was administrator for my parents' business for 17 years. So I was able to flex kind of that knowledge and those transferable skills into this role. In fact, this role didn't even exist within this law firm. I created it and negotiated it for this law firm because I had the requisite skills to manage the tasks that were given to me.
I think it's kind of a natural progression that we've seen over the years. I predate the existence of the legal operations role. I remember when that was a new thing, and it emerged initially from a paralegal who, as you say, is a strong project manager and administrator, someone who gets things done, keeps it together, saying, "Oh, I can take care of that." I think that was the whole emergence of the role.
It's so true, Al. I mean, seriously, if you think about it, and this is actually an interesting article that I do share with my students. I don't know if you've read it, but it's on collider.com. And I don't know if you all are MCU universe fans like I am. Anyone? I don't know. I am.
My
But
son has forced me to be. Please continue.
so there's this really great article they wrote on She-Hulk. And I think the name of the article was What She-Hulk Gets Right About Paralegals. And that's what caught my
Ooh.
attention. And so it was about the paralegal to Jen Walters, who's the attorney for all of the superheroes. And her name is Nikki Ramos. That's the name of the character. And they really highlighted how that modern legal team, right? It's like the paralegal is like the best friend to the lawyer, right, in that environment. And so I use that article in my class because I say, here's the dynamic that we focus on, right? That trust relationship that we build as team members on this legal team. But think about when you establish that trust and the lawyer says, oh, normally this is something I would handle, but I think you can handle this. Why don't you take a step? This is how it was always presented to me by my managing partner. Why don't you take a stab at it? And I said, sure, no problem. I don't know how to do it, but I will find a way. And thankfully, because I have worked really hard to develop a very broad and robust network over all these 20 years, that even if I didn't know what I was doing, I could phone my Fave 5 and just say, hey, does anyone know how to do this? And if they didn't, they would find someone to connect me to. So indeed, Hal, I think you're spot on that. I think it was probably someone saying, hey, I think you might be able to do this. And it just took off from there.
I bet they just offered, because I'm sorry, my wife is a former paralegal. Full disclosure, I know how good they are at project management. So I think that fusion of skills is really important. But it's really, really important right now for this transition that we're going through as AI becomes a much more important part of the workplace. And I know this is something you've been looking at. I noticed that you had written an article very recently for Practicing Law Institute. I want to make sure I'm getting the title right here. Future-proofing the paralegal profession, navigating AI, ethics, and emerging workflows in the legal industry. So I'm eager to delve into this with you. Like, what is the role of the paralegal as we move into a world of generative AI and now increasingly agentic AI? What's changing for the role that is different from when it changed before because we added SaaS products, or before that when we added online legal research, or all the other things that I've seen over too many years? Please share.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing up that article. It was really a piece that came out of a presentation we did before. So I am a paralegal educator, as I had mentioned. And so there was a spring virtual conference where we presented this as a topic of discussion for our fellow colleagues. And it was very interesting, I'll tell you, Hal and Meme, that, most of the paralegal educators part of this national association are mostly attorneys. So I'm kind of a unicorn in that way, in that I'm a paralegal practitioner teaching paralegals. So I'm like a paralegal educating paralegals, right? And so, right, go figure. So I, was very surprised when we presented this because we said, hey, look, this is not either or conversation about here's generative AI. Use this or don't, right? We're like, this is a yes and discussion. We're positing that it's here. You
Yeah.
should learn how to use it, what it is, and how this impacts your workflows. Because I had shared this with Meme in past discussions that there was a large media outlet that was looking for paralegals to go on record about how artificial intelligence was going to decimate our profession entirely. And I said, whoa, 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 whoa,
That sounds
whoa.
like a clickbait headline.
Right, indeed, right, Hal? And so I said, let's pump the brakes on that death spiral narrative, and let's revisit this from a different lens and context. And let's say, it's here. How do we use it professionally, ethically, and responsibly? within our workflows. And I caught something that you said earlier, Hal, which I really appreciate that you said, in that paralegals tend to be the early adopters or the early users of technology. And we test demo, right? And we bring it into our legal ecosystems. And that actually has been something I have done for my firm. It's been delegated to me, right? I'm part of the legal operations team that decides. I'm not the chief decision maker, but I'm the chief influencer on bringing in technology to assist in our workflows within our legal ecosystem. So I'm not only staying abreast of what's available out there for us, what exists, and then I will do the actual outreach and demo and then shortlist vendors and then make the recommendation to the leadership so that we can adopt these types of technologies to save us time, to be more profitable, in that we can take on more volume, right? But still have those pillars of accuracy, right? And the quality of our work, of the work product that we provide to our clients, but to be able to be that kind of that first line of defense. I say this to my students. I say, it's like we're quarterbacking for the attorneys, right? Eyes and ears on the horizon to make sure that we're troubleshooting, right? But not just troubleshooting, we go to the next level. And if we do find any pitfalls, we are then troubleshooting. We're troubleshooting and we're problem solving, right? So we are looking at ways to avoid those kinds of maybe it's mitigating liability to the firm, right? Any kind of exposure of liability to the firm. Or that, like I said, it could be a time savings for us in that way so that we can take on more volume of cases and take on more clients without sacrificing integrity and accuracy of our work product. So it's kind of looking at it and approaching it and reframing in that way, in that how is it that I can utilize this information, right? And Gen AI, I mean, it's developing so quickly, right? I don't even know, Memme, do you know we're like on 4.5 of ChatGPT? I don't even know where we are with that. It's iterating so quickly, right? No one's really an expert on this. So we're kind of we're figuring it out together. What are the implications real time of this type of fast evolving technology on our workflows, right? But I always bring up that whole ethical and professional use, because if you think about it, what are you attorneys most familiar with? Your professional rules of conduct, right? You have to abide by your professional rules of conduct. And so that means we too, as part of the modern legal team, have to be aware of what those rules are for the attorneys, because they extend to us and we have to make sure that we are within those boundaries in our workflows.
Yeah, but that said, applying those rules of conduct to the use of technology has been the source of God knows how many MCLE seminars the last 30 years. So it's not always obvious.
Now I love this discussion that we're getting into, because let's get some real talk up in here, okay? So here's where I'm part of, full disclosure, I'm part of a mastermind. It's called Idea Collective. So it's myself, I have the podcast myself, and so my co-host, and also an attorney who works in the e-discovery space, who used to be a partner at a law firm and headed up their e-discovery, and now is part of our little mastermind, Idea Collective. And we have talked about this issue ad nauseum. And here's why. Because when we cite to the rule of professional conduct that talks about competence, right? Oh, there's a comment that is that addresses your technological competency, but it is so vague, right?
Yeah.
And ambiguous. Terms you all are familiar with, right, as attorneys.
Yep.
Vague and ambiguous, and probably purposefully, right? Because what does that mean in terms of technological competence in serving our clients? And that is so broad because it's, again, very nuanced in what is your area of practice. For litigation folks, that's very different in terms of technological competency versus an in-house attorney general counsel and the team members that are part of that legal team. So, that competency is a huge discussion, because what does it really mean? And further, this is what we've also talked about, because we say, I asked the person in my mastermind, I said, did they teach you this in law school? And they're like, no, we don't go to law school to be technologists, right? We go to law school to be lawyers. So, and to
Unless
me,
you take Memme's class, that's the only exception.
obviously, big brain, right? So you're going to learn about this technology stuff. But I don't feel that there is an adequate job done in our curriculum as it exists for lawyers and other legal professionals in terms of legal technological competency on a baseline. right? Because what universal definition is there? Can anyone cite me a universal definition on technological competency for legal professionals across this country?
No, but the one may be universal. Like, people don't debate this; they just don't always think of it or apply it the right way. But the one universal of how the intersection of the professional code of conduct or codes of conduct, I should really say, and technology has been, you can't just point to the tech and use that as an excuse when something goes wrong. You are ultimately responsible for the quality of everything that you and your team do, whether it's Gen AI, whether it's an agent, whether it's a person, makes no difference. So that duty of supervision and care is there throughout.
Absolutely. And you're right. That is not a delegable, right, rule of professional competency is you cannot delegate my technological competence to my paralegal, right? You still have to be aware and knowledgeable enough to engage services, but to have oversight over those services that are being provided for your clients and for your legal matters. So indeed, that is absolutely something that we have to stay on top of. I tell my students, it's not ABCs anymore, it's ABLs. Always be learning. You can't, it's lifelong learning. You can't stop, just when you finish your training here with us, doesn't mean you stop learning. We have continuing legal education for a reason. The law is dynamic, things change. And now you throw in this Gen AI and things are changing even at a quicker pace. That is really incumbent for us to stay abreast of these changes and these technological competencies. So I have been compiling and aggregating a resource list, which is actually included Hal in that PLI article, the future proofing the paralegal profession. I'm compiling a list of resources for all legal professionals, not just targeted at lawyers, all legal professionals to avail so that they can stay educated and not have this kind of, because sometimes when you don't know something, you get a little bit of that fear or anxiety or that imposter syndrome comes up. So I think that
No idea what you're talking about.
no clue.
Hasn't
Right?
occurred to me. Okay. You'll tell
Fake
me
it till
more
you
about
make
this.
it.
You'll tell me more about this later. Okay.
That's when Dr. Psychologist Kristine comes out. But, I think that the opportunities that are available for people who are looking to expand, right? Because sometimes I think, and I look at the paralegal profession, and it can, for someone like me, especially a senior paralegal, a seasoned paralegal of 20 years, and sometimes you do think, oh my goodness, is the top, is that the cap for me? But because of this Gen AI and this technology and the ownership that we can have over it, right? To be the leaders, to be the lead for this in our legal teams, that it really provides ample opportunity for us to grow. And I gave an example. I give an example for myself in that I am a senior paralegal, but I'm also a director of business development for my law firm. So I'm a hybridized or a split role where I do handle like the senior, the complex litigation tasks of the firm and legal work of the firm. But I'm also on the legal ops side, right, where I'm handling business development. So it is opportunity. So I invite and I encourage folks who are kind of thinking, oh my gosh, technology, this Gen AI, I don't know what it is. And by the way, at that conference, I did an informal poll with the attendees. There were probably like 200 folks in attendance. And I said, okay, type it in the chat. Don't push enter yet. Don't press enter. But 1 to 10, scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this Gen AI? 1, run for the hills. Scared, don't know what this is. Scares me to death. And 10, love it. Use it every day. Couldn't live without it. Can't wait to see where this goes and where it's going to take us. And you can only imagine what those responses were. Again, across the board. But there were a lot of ones, right?
You had actual 1s and 10s.
We had actual 1s, 2s, and 3s.
Oh,
and we
okay.
had maybe maybe 2 10s, but there were strong 8s and 9s. I'm a 9.5, to be honest. So, I love it. I'm excited for this.
Well, let's get those numbers up then. Let's get folks excited about this. What would you say are some of the most impactful use cases you've seen for AI and generative AI that paralegals can use?
Well, I'm going to use myself as an example because as a business development director, department of one, because I work for a very small law firm and I support 3 partners of the law firm, in that when I'm wearing my business development director hat, I am expected to be researching, right, staying on top of trends and developments. And so we are ERISA attorneys, employee benefits law, for people who don't know what ERISA is. So I'm expected to not only research trends and developments, but to also write content, right, and participate in that regard. And then also with community relations, anything, right, marketing related, anything that falls under that kind of broad scope of business development is my jurisdiction and domain. And so I have oversight, and that is my wheelhouse, right? So I, look at that and I'm thinking, okay, so how is this going to help me as a department of one? Right. And it has exponentially assisted my workflows in that I rely on it. I've trained my closed LLM, large language model, right? I've trained my closed LLM on how I would like for my content to be developed, how I am researching, and to stay on top of my source authorities. Because here's the thing that we address as people who support Gen AI and are looking for resources constantly is no blind reliance. The other thing is the human-centered approach, right? When that big media outlet came at us and said, paralegals be gone, I said, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. So when that was proposed to us, I thought to myself, no, 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 no. We're going to really center the human elements that are necessary to the practice of law. That client-facing interaction, right? Those non-negotiable skills of communication, and those of us who are client-facing, to really underscore the importance of that in the use of these assistive tools such as Gen AI in our workflows. This is why ethical and responsible and professional use of this assistive tool, is so important. So this is where I really hope to see our profession, our industry, start developing resources, because it's kind of been haphazard, is my observation, with regard to there's no unified organization that's looking at Gen AI as it relates to the legal profession. We've seen roundtables from the ABA for Gen AI and, white papers and reports in that regard. But if you think about it, even think about folks in litigation, how are they tracking what Gen AI disclosures or use within the court systems, in our work product? How do they track what those requirements are or those rules are, right? Is there a unifying body that is tracking that? And the answer is no. We're all kind of siloed and doing that. Right. So that's kind of my hope, is that we come up with some sort of, I don't know, tech task force, something where we have thought leaders, folks that are interested in this type of topic and the implications on the broad legal industry, not necessarily on, the in-house corporate folks, the litigation folks, the family law. Gen AI hits everything. It's not just even our industry, it's our society, and the way that it can help or assist us as legal professionals can be game-changing, like it has for me, because it is a time saver. But I have to understand that I do not engage in blind reliance on this, right?
Right.
I, as the human centered in this process, have to make sure I'm vetting the resources. I have to make sure it's not like an attorney a litigator would file a brief with the court with the attestation and signature signing off saying, this is my work product, it is accurate, and not site check. That happened in New York for the first one who got zinged on using Gen AI and didn't disclose, right? And then doubled down and said, no, Your Honor, in fact, that's a real case. When they got called on the carpet and doubled down, and then they ended up in sanctions. That was the first one that took the hit.
Is this the same one where the attorney responded, yes, I did site check. I site checked by asking
Gen AI.
Gen AI, those cases you just gave me, are they real? And it said yes.
Yeah, someone told me like Gen AI is like a Labrador retriever. It just wants to please you. So you have to like really, and this is what I say, take it with a grain of salt. You know how we're, as legal professionals and lawyers, this, right? You're risk averse. You're trained that way, right? You're trained that way, but you're also trained to think of and look at things with a grain of salt, because you're supposed to objectively look at these things, right? Good litigators know both sides, can argue both sides, right? So when we're approaching Gen AI and tools like that, we cannot operate in blind reliance. Oh, well, because it told me so. How do you know? I mean, that is your attestation, right, on that document that you're filing with the court that says this is my work product and it is accurate.
You get into that in the article to some degree in the context of Model Rule 1.6 and about ensuring that generative AI tools are secure and compliant with firm policies. So you've talked about you've got to have that human supervision over it. I think that is now through trial and error been well established. What other ethical considerations are there around that, though, from perspective of security, privacy, et cetera?
Man, this is like a burgeoning field for any of you legal professionals out there looking to upskill, or you're like, what's next for me? This is like a not prime opportunity for you to learn about technology, to learn about cybersecurity, even privacy, to expand, right? Like, again, to go back to Memme's Paralegal 2.0, because it is just, you are ripe for this type of situation. And I will bring up a resource that I have listed on my aggregated list of resources for legal professionals to kind of avail to educate themselves on this type of technology. It's called Rails. Have you all heard of this? Rails, like
I've heard
guardrails,
about it
right?
because I've researched you.
Well, great. Well, I'm going to use my soapbox. Pardon me as I step
Please
up on
do.
my little soapbox right now on Rails. This is through Duke Law School, and shout out to Kelly Raker, who I got to interview, and this is how I learned about this. And I actually did another article, which I'd love to share with you all, and it was on Rails and the Justice Technology Association to kind of bring forward these resources that I learned through Kelly Raker of the Duke Law and Tech Center about these types of guardrails that are in place. Well, Duke put out this Rails, which is responsible AI in legal services. Well, go figure, So there is a think tank that's out there that are talking about these issues. Because when you talk about how internal policies of use, ethical and professional use of these types of technologies, Gen AI specifically, within our workflows, working on client matters, a whole bevy of things come up, right? What do you start thinking about? I start thinking about disclosure. Oh my gosh, do we have to tell the clients? Do we have to tell the clients that we're using Gen AI on their projects? That's another thing that we're going to think about. We're going to think about, okay, so the training aspect of it. How do we make sure that people know how to use this type of assistive tool or device properly in their workflows? Because we don't engage in blind reliance, right? We have to make sure we understand what is the difference between an open and closed large language model, LLM, so that we know that we're not putting out client confidential information in all of the, internet for everyone to see, or training these open source LLMs on our private client information. Not to mention, you mentioned cybersecurity. Oh my gosh, this is like a whole nother conversation in and of itself, Hal and Meme, because think about the bad actors out there who want information that belong to law firms, legal departments, lawyers, right? Or they belong to the clients, but we are responsible for safeguarding those client confidential information. And think about it even from your lens or context. Like, think about proprietary information, trade secrets, very, very confidential information, right? That bad actors want their hands on, right? And so if we don't have proper training in place and embedded into our internal policies, in our onboarding training and orientation type of processes within the employment process, problematic. Remember, we talked about mitigation of exposure of risk or liability to a law firm or a lawyer? This is a prime example where this could go wrong.
We talk to so many folks that are using a wide range of things, not just a vetted, legal specific tool. They're using consumer tools. They're using apps. They're using the things that are built in now to their browser, the things that are built into their phone. There's so many nuances to it. You talked about disclosing the use of generative AI. We're almost at the point, I think, where you kind of have to disclose you're not using generative AI to any potential client. It's almost a given that it's going to be leveraged in some fashion. So these organizations, Rails is great, and there's obviously numerous, think tanks and organizations and folks with these kinds of standards. I don't think we're going to see a unified standard that makes all of these things clear. I think it's just going to evolve and evolve and evolve. So it's interesting to hear about the paralegal role in that, because you kind of are the glue for multiple attorneys who don't necessarily align or talk to each other, right?
Yeah. It's so funny. Get out of my head, Hal, because you said glue. And this is a way to describe paralegals. We're the glue to our legal ecosystem. It's a scary place in there, so you might want to exit quickly.
I'm enjoying it right now.
But yeah, I mean, this is real talk, isn't it? It's the practical application of these big issues, right? And not just in our profession as legal professionals, societally. Think about some of these issues that we are being faced with. And you're right, indeed, where it's almost like we have to be disclosing when we don't use AI. And at that conference, interestingly, there were a few seasoned lawyers that were participating in the chat, which we always encourage, and they were totally scorched earth about Gen AI.
Sure.
They were like, the world is over as we know it, cheating. Everyone's going to be useless because they're not going to be able to engage in any kind of critical thinking. Forget about writing skills, because remember, I talked about communication skills being non-negotiable for legal professionals. So, we went from that discussion point, in our presentation before our fellow paralegal educators, many who are lawyers. And, it's kind of that mindset refresh or reframing that we all have to engage in. Because to your point, Hal, you're right. State law is different from state to, right? The laws from state to state differ, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
the advisor notes the interpretations even of the model rules
the
sometimes
case law,
differ.
all of it. It's just going to
Yeah.
be, right? It's just going to vary from state to state. However, again, with respect to those universal core truths, right? Think about it. What does it mean to use it professionally, use this Gen AI or assistive tool professionally? What does that mean? What does that look like? Because at the end of the day, a lot of it, right? We are a customer service. We're client providing services, right? So we have to think about the confidentiality, right? The confidential information that we're dealing with, that we're securing and safeguarding on behalf of our clients, right? Think about that in that regard. Does that change from state to state? No, there are some universal truths and core competencies that we can teach, right? And so this is where I think, and interestingly, one of the resources that I include on that article is MIT's computational law, comp law. Have you all? Yeah, see, maybe simpatico. So there was this really cool article. I don't know if you read it. I think it was Barbara Brajakova. I cannot remember how to say her name, but it was something that I used in my future proofing, or I should say because my co-host Kelly Radnathy and I co-presented and co-wrote this article on future proofing the paralegal profession. So I digress. And this we use this as kind of a case study or a use case of how to train the modern day legal professional. So this article out of MIT Comp Law talked about in Prague at Charles University, how they have a course in their law school that is called Modern Lawyers Course. Wow. And remember how we talked about earlier, how we don't really have any kind of, you all have that law practice course that you do in law school, but you don't really have any technology courses, right? As part of your core curriculum, I don't think.
Generally speaking, no. That's why I keep calling on Memme, is a lecturer at Harvard and teaches one of the rare courses on this front.
So going back to that thing, Meme, and Hal, thank you for saying that, but this Charles University course on, the Modern Lawyers course talks about how these tools are available, how the students within this course can actually build projects using this type of generative AI, right? And they can actually, in a sandbox, in a safe space, right? Not an open LLM or divulging all of this confidential information, and also making mistakes, right? Because that's where we learn, is when we fall flat on our face and we just get right back up and figure out and iterate. So we have to have that space where we're able to kind of interplay and interact with that technology and see what does this look like real time in a legal matter, and what kind of tools are available, right? And so they have a sandbox for their students to actually work through, kind of like a client project or matter, utilizing these types of tools and resources, and it's within a safe environment. And they have their lecturers and other subject matter experts that come in to have these discussions around the use of these tools in their workflows. Genius, right? And so I thought to myself, we need to have more of these conversations with the folks, the thought leaders, folks like Meme and I, who are educators, for legal professionals, so that we have a space to be able to ideate, to have discourse, to have the scorched earth discussion, right? But also to have the whole, let's come down to planet Earth and talk about what is happening and how we are using this, how we are providing blueprints or exemplars, templates of internal policies that we may utilize. I think maybe that's where the discussion should be going, in the near future here. And I think it is. I'm hopeful when I saw that Rails is actually doing a fellowship. They're doing an inaugural cohort for Rails fellows. And I thought, this is going to be so good. So good. Because think about the folks that are going to participate in that conversation.
Yeah. And that's fascinating, especially the fact that, we talk about this education, right? I'm curious if you were to give advice to a young professional starting off their paralegal career today, what advice you would give them? And in particular, I did want to just, highlight again, you have a very unique hybrid role as a paralegal and a business development leader. Any advice that might be able to help young professionals achieve those kinds of unique dream roles, I think would be appreciated.
There's a couple things I would say, and that's a wonderful question, Meme. I would say one, stay curious. My ABL, always be learning, lifelong learning, right? But also don't put yourself in a box, right? Cast a wide vision for yourself because you might be in a position where you're like me, where you can actually be an architect of your own career, right? Where you take ownership of what it is that I see, and you have to be able to make that pitch, right, to the leadership teams and wherever you're situated, and to be able to make that case, make that pitch on how this is valuable, right, for your environment. How is this going to make us more profit? How is this going to save us time? How is this going to make us less at risk, right, for having any kind of liability on us for malpractice or in, missing deadlines or in researching, right? So I think that, one, be curious, stay curious, always be learning, but also sky's the limit. Like I said earlier, opportunities abound. The world is your oyster. And I think that's what's so exciting about this transformative era that we're in, right? Is that we don't really know what's coming. So you are part of that dynamic situation where you can develop that for yourself and craft it as a career architect.
Yeah. And I guess while we don't know what's coming, within law firms, and you have a unique view, as you said, you're also, one of the chief influencers as you're adopting new technologies. What are the kind of applications of AI within law firms that you think are going to be moving the needle?
Oh my gosh, everything. And have you noticed how these Gen AI companies are getting very specific to workflows now, right? There's an AI for everything. AI for everything. Think about it. The possibilities are endless with regard to how these types of tools are going to help us in our specific workflows. Example, like in litigation workflow, I know in my legal research database, right? I was in charge of shopping and kind of doing the demo on, the AI that was embedded within our legal research database. And but I was like the mind blown emoji. I was like, oh my gosh, the attorneys have this new. I thought, oh, this is so amazing. And so, I have a tiny bit of a tech resistant attorney here. And I said, and rightfully so, you should be that deliberative when you're approaching new tools and embedding them. That's a cost consideration as well, especially for a small law firm like mine. We're very judicious about our decision making and budgeting. And so, once we hashed out and talked about it and I convinced him to do the demo, he's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And I said, imagine a small legal team, a department of one, litigation department right here with my three partners, right? The three partners of the law firm, that we are able to take on more projects, right? We can do more quality control, right? Based on these generative AI tools that are embedded with our specific workflows. In this case, right, our legal research database, because that Gen AI that's embedded within that tool, that product that we are subscribed to, can do many things, including research, drafting initial drafts, kind of what I use my chat GPT for, I have the closed one. I actually use it for ideating. I use it as kind of my personal assistant, right? And I'm saying like, hey, I want to look at these particular trends and developments in ERISA because I need to create content, and because we need to establish ourselves as the subject matter experts, which we are, but we have to make sure that we are staying on top of trends and developments and what we see within our, client projects, but also synthesizing that information and being even those thought leaders and saying, oh, we can see how this is going to be an issue, coming down the pipeline. So here's another resource that I love. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I'm not being paid for this. So, but this is something I even have it on my Audible. How to Think About AI, A Guide for the Perplex by Richard Susskind. Have you read
Mm.
his books?
Yeah, he's a great thinker.
Chef's
He's
kiss.
ahead of the time in terms when it comes to AI and law.
Indeed, out of the UK, right? And so this is just such a great place to start, right? Part of my ABLs. Read this book. If you don't want to read, get the audiobook and listen to it when you're going on your run or whatever, walk, because just start somewhere, right? My point is just start somewhere. Don't fear it. Don't run from it. Run to it.
To close us out with one last question, as you said, there's so many new legal AI tools out there that you can't open LinkedIn or email without tripping over one. But if you had your own magic wand and unlimited VC money, and you could create an AI solution to automate something that unduly takes up the time of paralegals today, what kind of solution would you create?
Man, that's a loaded question, Memme. I mean, you're giving me a magic wand to fix all of the things that we see as
VCs are
paralegals.
listening.
I mean, VCs, come and talk to me. So if I had a magic wand, right, what would I do? First, I would want to clone myself and get a mini-me, right? So I could be sitting on the beach somewhere, enjoying sipping my beverage with an umbrella in it while I'm making the mini-me do all of my legal tasks.
Well, now we've left She-Hulk and we're getting into Severance. I don't know. Lots of ethical considerations.
Maybe we need to create a show. This is what we need to do. Let's do that, right? We'll just workshop a new series ourselves. So, in any event, I digress. It would obviously be to, automate some of these more rote tasks because we would want to leave space for the higher value work, right? So, just to be able to explore the realm of possibilities of what this looks like going forward, with these tools at hand, because it's not what that big media outlet said, right? Oh, AI's coming for you, paralegals. It's not that at all. What does the future look like, especially for paralegals? Limitless, right? But it's going to be incumbent upon us as legal professionals to understand these tools, to be able to use these tools, right? And even to step out and in our fear, right? And in faith and say, I can learn this. And see what this can do for us, because it's a matter of creating and ideating. As quickly as Gen AI is iterating, so should we.
Kristine Custodio Suero, it's a pleasure talking to you, and it gives me great confidence knowing you are training the next generations of paralegals.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Meeting of the Minds, the Legal AI podcast, is brought to you by Evisort. To learn more about Evisort and how we can help you contract better with AI, visit Evisort, EVISORT.com.
You can find Meeting of the Minds on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to click subscribe so you won't miss future episodes.
On behalf of everyone here at Evisort, thanks for tuning in.